Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us this morning for Coffee with the Collection. My name is Amanda and I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art. Before we get started, let's go over a little housekeeping first. Everyone should be on mute right now, and I'd like to ask you all to keep yourselves muted so we can hear our presenter without any distractions. But if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question during the presentation, please feel free to do so using the chat feature. To open your chat, scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on the icon that looks like a speech bubble. It should also say chat just underneath. Once you click that, a window will open to the side of your screen where you'll be able to type questions and comments, and we'll circle back around to those at the end of the presentation. Without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Delaynna Trim, who will be discussing Leonora Carrington's enigmatic painting Friday from the museum's permanent collection. Delaynna is the Curator of Collections at the Mabee-Gerrer Museum of Art in Shawnee. In addition, she is a lecturer at Oklahoma Baptist University teaching all of the art history courses. Delaynna has a Bachelor of Arts in History with a minor in Museum Studies from Oklahoma Baptist University and a Master's of Art in Art History from the University of Oklahoma. Delaynna has been an active board member on the Oklahoma Museums Association Board for 15 years, currently serving as secretary. She also serves on the Mountain Plains Museums Association Board as vice president. So I'd like to invite everyone to sit back, relax, grab your cup of coffee. Hopefully you have with you this month's special roast, Make What You Will of It, made available especially for this program through our friends at Black Camel Coffee, and will continue to be available on their website after this program. And I just have to say, now that some of the restrictions have been lifted and we're able to have a communal coffee pot in the break room again, everyone on staff at the museum this morning is enjoying a delicious cup of Make What You Will of It. Thank you so much for that, Darren. And now, Delaynna, I'll hand things over to you.
Okay, so I have loved Leonora's work for many years now, and so I'm fairly familiar with her work, but it was exciting to get back into it and do some more research for this. So we're going to talk about the piece that you guys have at the Fred Jones Jr. Museum of Art, which is Friday. But first, I actually want to talk a little bit about her life. So, oops. So first we need to talk about, first of all, she died, as you can see, not too long ago. She lived a very long life. So she was born Mary Leonora Carrington, and this is where she was born. She was born in Crookie Hall in Cockerham, Lancashire, England. And she had a fairly privileged upbringing. However, her father, Harold, was a wealthy textile manufacturer. She and her father did not get along at all. He did not approve of these things called artists and the arts, and so he really thought that she should pursue a husband and get married and settle down and the more traditional kind of life there. And so he did not agree with her choice of lifestyle. He was English and her mother was Irish, and this is actually quite important. Her mother actually kind of secretly helped her along. She didn't want to disturb too much with her husband, but she actually did help her daughter in several instances, and I think she secretly was very pleased that her daughter did become an artist. So in 1935, Leonora was able to go to the Ozenfant Academy of Fine Arts in London, and so she was studying art for the first time away from her parents. She was really coming into her own, and she met a surrealist artist named Max Ernst. You probably have heard of him. He's pretty well known. She said she actually fell in love with his art first and then just had to meet him. So they ended up meeting. Evidently it was love at first sight, according to both of them. She ended up following him back to Paris. He was married at the time. He ended up leaving his wife for Leonora. They never actually officially got married, but they were together from 1937 to 1940. And you probably are well aware of what was happening in Europe during this time, which was, of course, World War II was starting. And this is actually what ultimately drove them apart. So early on in the war, the French government actually arrested Max Ernst and put him in prison because he was a German national living in France during the beginning parts of the war. And she fought tirelessly to get him out. She finally did. They were reunited, but they realized the precarious position they were in. But he really didn't want to leave their idyllic little village and their house and everything. Ultimately, he was arrested again, this time by the Gestapo whenever the Germans did invade France. And Leonora realized the peril that she was in. They were both degenerate artists, according to the Nazi regime. This is not a good position to be in. The one thing Max had on his side is that he was a very well-known artist. Leonora, however, was not known, and so she realized she had to flee. She ended up fleeing to Spain, ended up having a mental breakdown. Be understandable when everything is, you're basically leaving with the clothes on your back, your lover's in prison, everything is just kind of going, crumbling around you. However, this was a very traumatic experience. She ended up in a asylum in Madrid. It was given convulsive therapy or shock treatment, as well as the drugs cortisol and luminol, which is a barbiturate. She writes later and down below about her experiences, also about some sexual assaults during this time. This is a very traumatic experience, obviously. She was able to finally escape from this, and was able to flee to Portugal in Lisbon. These are some of her early works, by the way, just so you can kind of see some of her early work of Max Ernst that she did, and self-portrait. Horses, you saw in that beginning slide, her writing some horses. She's always identified with horses throughout her life. So in Portugal, she ended up meeting up with Renato Leduc. He was a poet that she was familiar with. They had met before, thanks to Picasso. So he and Picasso actually would go to bullfights together, and so she had met him before, knew him. And because he was the secretary at the Mexican legation there in Lisbon, she contacted him, and basically they agreed to a marriage of convenience in order that he could get her out of Europe at this time. So they end up marrying. There is this insane period of time where she had just married Leduc. They were waiting to leave Europe, and they end up running into Max Ernst. He is finally out of prison thanks to the efforts of Peggy Guggenheim. And Peggy Guggenheim is trying to get Max to marry her, and ends up, has her ex-husband, Max's first wife, all these kids, and Renato and Leonora all end up in the same little village in Portugal. So that's a whole crazy thing as well. Long story short, Leduc is able to get Leonora out. They go to New York for a period of time. And Leonora continues on with her work. Max ends up marrying Peggy Guggenheim briefly. So you can really see Leonora is a full-fledged member of the Surrealists. She was in Europe and she was in New York. only recently has she really been given her due, along with other female surrealists. You'll notice that there's not a lot of women in these photographs. There's not a lot of women in the surrealists. This has a lot to do with Andre Breton. Let me start on him. But a lot of this, so she's working very hard to have this recognition that these male surrealists have, and she continues working. So they stay in New York for a while. It's actually the end of 1942 that they end up going to Mexico. And she and Leduc part ways. And so she ends up meeting a lot of expatriates from Europe who have fled. Included among those is a Hungarian Jewish photographer named Americo, or Cheeky Weiss. And so she ends up marrying Cheeky in 1946. They stay married until her death, his death, in 2007. Interestingly enough, she is a very free spirit, as you'll learn, and so there are multiple affairs, at least on her part. She spends sometimes many years apart from Cheeky, but she ultimately always goes back to him. He actually never leaves Mexico. He has just endured a lot of trauma from the war and escaping from the war, and so he actually doesn't leave Mexico again. She has two sons with Cheeky, Gabriel and Pablo, or Gabby, as he is often known. And so I actually paired this with one of her paintings, which is a great piece. This is the Giantess, the Guardian of the Egg. And she painted this when she was pregnant with one of her sons. And anyone who has been pregnant realizes how huge they feel at certain parts. And so I think, again, everyone who's been pregnant kind of feels this way at one point in time and can kind of commiserate with this. And of course, there's the symbolism of the egg and the birds as well. While she is in Mexico, and she basically lives on and off in Mexico the rest of her life. There are periods of time where she spends in New York and Chicago, but ultimately she always goes back to Mexico after fleeing Europe. She never really returns to England. I read in one of the interviews that she had no idea who even was the monarch of England at one point in time. So she just really shut that door on her family. There was a lot of pain and suffering with her and her father, and so she really just shut that door. This is a large mural that she did. It's probably the largest of all the pieces she's ever done. And of course, this is incorporating a lot of the Mexican symbolism, both Catholicism as well as the indigenous. And this is something you're going to see in a lot of her works, is that she loves incorporating mythology, folklore. These stories are very important to her. So now that you know a little bit about Leonora, let's start talking about the piece. This is the piece you guys have, Friday from 1978. So one thing to get off the bat is that she does not say what she thinks of her pieces. She does not interpret them. She's notorious for this. Of course, a lot of artists are. They don't want to tell you what to see. They want you to come up with your own. And so there is no official, this is what this is about. So everything we say is conjecture, guesswork, but that's kind of the point. So we have in this, we have this bubble here. And it's kind of interesting because we have kind of the main part of the bubble, and then we have this kind of a side bubble that's kind of connected, but it is kind of different. So in the main bubble, we have these three women, or three figures, I should say. So there's possible interpretations. One interpretation is that these are three women. She tends to like to put these older women in her paintings, thrones, if you will, and especially the number three. It's kind of an important number in a lot of symbology, as well as Catholicism. She was raised Catholic. So we have these three figures. Another possible interpretation is that this is more of a family unit, that this could be like a grandmother, a mother, and a child because of the size. So it's kind of hard to tell if this figure on the right is meant to be a child because of the size, or meant to just be a small adult. The small figure is jumping something on the table, again, not meant to really know what it is. She does do a lot with alchemy in her works, and with that gold color, that's kind of interesting. And then we've got the fish. Now, this is whenever we look back at the title and go, well, Friday. This obviously has some meaning to have this title. She does tend to put a lot of work into the titles. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, Friday fish. She was raised Catholic. So this has something to do with Catholics eat fish on Fridays, especially during Lent. And so this is possibly something to deal with Catholicism or her upbringing. It is interesting that this figure is kind of beckoning the fish towards her. The figure is wearing a butterfly outfit, and then we've got the two colors of socks, or stockings or hose, whatever you want to call them. And then we have the figure on the right, on the far right. And he's kind of an interesting figure. So dressed all in black. So there's could be possible interpretations of him. Could be that he's somehow conjuring this the rest of the bubble, or that maybe this is an artist and this is a canvas. There's a lot of interpretations with that. Oh, the smoking. This figure, the central figure is smoking. Leonora was a lifelong smoker. So there could be some personal reference there to her own life. And of course the teapot, and of course growing up British, gotta have your tea. So let's look at some other pieces that she did and kind of do some comparisons and contrasting and see if we can kind of come up with maybe some conclusions from all of this. So first off, going into, again, she had several pieces dealing with Catholicism. Again, she was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, trained by nuns, did not have the best experiences in some of those schools. She was a free spirit in a system that did not like free spirits. So in this piece, this is actually referencing a much older piece set in Venice, talking about a sect of monks that had found a section of the true cross that supposedly created miracles. So we've got these nuns in the boat and on the shore and in the water, and most of them seem to be kind of ignoring things. We do have the fish again. Notice that the fish are kind of jumping out of the water. Actually, one of the most important details is actually one of the fuzzier ones. It's in the far left side. It's the figure kind of rushing towards the nuns. This is supposed to be an upside down crucifix that the figure is rushing towards. You see that the nun in the bow of the boat is pointing towards the figure, and we have another figure in the boat who is passed out from the shock of it all. And again, just an example of one of her other works, again, kind of detailing her Catholic upbringing there. We also have an egg. You'll notice that eggs are a lot of her work. Speaking of, who art thou, white face? This is actually one of my favorite pieces. possibly because this was the first piece I ever saw of hers. And this is kind of what made me fall in love with her and her work. So again, we're not going to go through all the symbolism because there's so much, but I wanted to bring this one out partly because of the wonderful butterfly wings. So we have this griffin-like figure here, but we definitely have lots of different textures going along here in this amalgam of creatures. So we've got the butterfly. We also have two different kinds. We have a hoof and a paw. So that's kind of interesting. She's added that. And then we've got this whole Garden of Eden possible thing going on in the upper left quadrant. She did like butterflies, so Lepidopterus, which of course is the species for butterflies and moths. And so we've got these kind of butterfly figures, if you will, and they're all sitting around a table. This is one thing you're going to notice, and a lot of her works are centered around a table. Most of the works I want to show you are, and I could probably have included dozens and dozens more. The table is very important, and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit later, but it's the center of her personal life. It's kind of where friends come together. It's where she does work. It's where everyone comes, and it's important in her art as well. And so we have all of these butterfly figures gathering around this table to partake of the food. Interestingly enough, while the butterfly figures are the people, if you will, we've got these black ducks that are kind of the pets that are being fed at the table. And then we have this great photo I found of her with her work not long after it was created. Here's a couple of other pieces. Again, having tables, eggs, again, important. Chairs, we actually have several similarities, so I kind of paired them here together. Again, we've got, I actually included Avocode, specifically because of the wonderful butterflies she's included in this. You notice she does a lot with color, textures in her work. She is a figurative surrealist, so everything has some connection to something real or imagined. It's not really abstract. Again, there's a lot we can say about this work. The text here on the back of the chair translates to keep away from any with a black tail. Indeed, this is the beauty of the earth. This actually comes from an obscure alchemical text. Alchemy is a big influence on her work. And so we're going to notice alchemy, and it's very similar to cooking, which in her personal life, she loved cooking. And so there's not really a big jump from cooking to alchemy or chemistry. Of course, alchemy all has to do with the transformation of matter. Now, we're mostly familiar with this. Some people try to convert base metals into gold. So basically turning another type of metal into a gold. But it's also been used to try to create a elixir of immortality. And so that's kind of an interesting thought whenever you look at some of her works. This is the white people of the Tuatha De Danann, and this is dealing a lot with her Celtic mythology. Her mother was Irish, her grandmother was Irish, and she got a lot of folk tales, mythology from her grandmother and her nanny that helped raise her. And so her childhood was steeped with these stories, and I think that really helped form her mind, her imagination. And so the Tuatha De Danann are a mythical kind of fairy first race, the Irish people. And so this is kind of imagining of these people. But again, it's the central table. That's why I included this as the table there in the center. You also notice the little cat there in the bottom right corner. She had cats her entire life, as well as dogs, and she's a big animal lover. So you'll oftentimes see little animals kind of making appearances in her work. And I had to include this one. This is Grandma Moorhead's Aromatic Kitchen. And the reason why is because this is the other Carrington in Oklahoma. It's the only two, at least that I'm aware of, in Oklahoma. And this is in Ardmore at the Goddard Center. So unfortunately, I have not seen it. When I tried to go see it, I was not able to see it. It was in a boardroom that was busy at the time. So one of these days, I still want to go and actually visit this wonderful painting. Grandma Morehead, that is her mother's mother, her Irish grandmother. She was close to. Specifically, she was close to her while she was cooking. That her grandmother had this big kitchen, and people would gather around while she was cooking. And this is what Leonora remembers about her, and actually told an interviewer. And so this is based roughly on her grandmother's kitchen. The interesting thing is, though, all the produce there on the kitchen table, you'll notice, actually is very Mexican inspired. Yes, she was in Mexico when she painted this. So it is very much inspired by what she would have had on her kitchen table there in Mexico. Of course, then we have these fantastical creatures. Again, we have the idea of, are they cooking, or what are they creating? We have the figure in the bottom left-hand side, who seems to again be concocting something, or what is he doing there? There's again, there's a lot we can say about a lot of these pieces, but the kitchen table is a very central part of her existence, and again, goes back to her childhood. The house opposite. You'll notice that I'm actually been picking pieces from a wide variety of times, and therefore also places in her life. So 1945, she had just arrived in Mexico, and but she's still definitely referencing those European style houses with that black and white flooring on the right hand side, got that central long table, very similar to one that was there at the hall that she grew up with. And the woods there, and then we've got this rocking horse. And there's a long story with the rocking horse. Is definitely central to her and her beginnings as an artist. Max Ernst actually bought her this rocking horse, which of course being kind of a symbol of her for much of her life. And so we've got maybe some longing for Europe, for her previous life, for her childhood, all of that kind of can be summarized in just that rocking horse that seems to be in the woods there. This is another one, Mama Eos, that we've got the butterfly wings. So she does seem to like the kind of that butterfly motif in a lot of her works. So some of her works, most of her works are fairly small, except for, again, that mural that was in Mexico City. Otherwise, we tend to have very small pieces you would see on someone's wall or something. It was a very large scale. Again, we have a table, we have a chalice, we have an egg. These are things that we're kind of familiar with seeing at this point. This is feeding a table, So this figure is feeding this table, sitting on a stool made of a bird. So we've got, again, these birds. I included this one because of course, the teapot. I didn't see a whole lot of teapots in her work, but we had to have another one that had a teapot like we saw in Friday. Yes, she had a teapot with her all throughout her life and would drink tea. She would bring tea over from England. So yes, that's one of the few things she did retain from her English childhood. And of course, we've got that wonderful cat in the upper left quadrant there. He's kind of licking his paws, surveying what's all going on. Here's another one, again, with the bird, almost butterfly though, wings on the bird, the designs at least. So you kind of see, again, this is a fairly small piece, so blown up you can really see the texture and the details in her work. Her work is very detail oriented. And also, again, there's a lot that she does with color in her work. St. Teresa in the kitchen, again, kitchen, and a fish. We've got a fish in the bottom right quadrant here. And this figure is cooking over this cauldron, and we've got a cat who obviously got scared from something. And then we've got the egg as well. So again, all of these things, but again, cooking very close to alchemy. As you see, what is she exactly creating in that pot? We really don't know. The hunt breakfast, yet another central table. Again, we've got fruits and vegetables that are from Mexico. And so what do these mean? Eggs, again, there's a lot of symbolism there. And again, the central table. Again, she's still working a lot with, her childhood. We have these two figures in the bottom left quadrant that are out going hunting. We've got the dogs and the pheasants, and they're in their riding and hunting clothes, very much reflecting her upbringing. She disliked hunting. In fact, a Jewish friend of her father's would come over oftentimes. He would never go hunting, and she thought that was wonderful that he didn't go hunting. And she would actually sit and talk with him about Judaism and about all, life and all these things, while her father and all the other people were out hunting in the sheep. She disliked. This is the old maid. So she does a lot with women in her work. Some describe her as an early feminist. She really did not see any reason why she shouldn't be as good as the rest of the surrealist artists. Didn't see any real reason why she can't do a lot of things. And she didn't really make a big deal out of it. She just thought, what's the difference? And she does a lot with women, especially the women getting older in her works. And so probably as she herself is getting older, this is an earlier piece. She's really, throughout her years, you see a lot of works featuring women. Again, the idea of the crone, the old woman, start featuring in a lot of her later works. Of course, it is Leonora. She's a surrealist, so we've got fantastical. So we've got this fantastical creature there in the center. It's kind of otherworldly alien. Three women and crows at the table. Oftentimes you do see three. Women in threes seem to be a popular thing. Again, we've got a table, we've got fish, we've got birds, even in this small piece. We've got those elements there together. And I wanted to show a piece that had the dichotomy. She actually has several, but it's starting to get long. So we've got this figure that got the black and the white together. Again, like the socks or hose or however you want to phrase that. of that figure. We've got that duality there. She was fascinated with world religions, Tibetan Buddhism, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, mythology. So that dualism, again, features in a lot of different world religions. So it's really hard to pinpoint that it's one specific thing that it comes from. But probably all of them, this idea of coming together. You will notice that not only is the face both black and white, but one hand is white and one hand is black. So we've got, again, that duality in the figure itself. This one is called The Conjurer. And so I don't know if there's a connection there. This is from 1960, ours is from 78. And finally, can't talk about how important kitchen tables are to her in her life without showing you her kitchen tables. So this is her kitchen table, two different images of it. These were photographs taken when Susan Aberth was doing some interviews with her for a book that she created. And so first of all, it's kind of interesting that she doesn't have this giant, beautiful, huge, modern kitchen. It's a very simple kitchen, but it has everything she needs, all of her pots and pans and spices. And evidently her kitchen table always looked like this. It was always filled with stuff, filled with things from tea to sweets to mail, whatever she was working on. A friend of hers was Remedios Varo, and they would come together, and they were both surrealist artists, and they would come and work at this table. They would cook, and they would paint and draw and cook some more, and this was all part of the whole process. One thing about her is that she was notoriously disliked being interviewed. So it wasn't really towards much the end of her life that she started granting some interviews, but even then she was highly selective and only allowed a few people to interview her. She was kind of notorious for turning people down, and if for some reason they were able to come to her house, she would just turn them away. She disliked dealing with that. She just wanted to kind of live her life. And this funny anecdote, I read that she was fluent in multiple languages. She was fluent in French, Spanish, and of course English. And so she would switch back and forth between these languages as she talked. And so that was kind of a fun thing for the interviewer to try to keep up with her as she's kind of fiddling around the kitchen and also flipping back and forth between 3 different languages as she's answering these questions. So going back to the painting, what we're kind of focusing on. So we know now that she focuses a lot of figures around the table. This is an important element in her works, this coming together, this camaraderie, this family life. We still don't know exactly, again, who these figures are or might represent. So again, they might represent 3 generations of a family, or they might represent 3 friends. We really don't know, but we have these 3 figures. We have a table, we have the idea of the teapot, which means they're going to have tea together. They're going to talk and sit and communicate. We have the duality of the socks or the hose on the lady on the left there. We have the butterfly garment that she's wearing. Purely supposition, but I know that she did definitely like butterflies for her life, and maybe she liked the freedom that they had. This is something, again, she didn't have until she was a young woman, able to finally free the confines of her life with her father. So maybe she viewed them as a way of freedom, or maybe she just thought they were pretty to look at. We really don't know. But regardless, these figures are all in this bubble, this kind of protective bubble, this wonderful sheen around it. And you know, the fish, maybe that is representing a pet, or maybe that's representing dinner. Again, she leaves a lot to the imagination. And then the figure on the right, I think he's the most hard to decipher, again, because he seems to be in his own little bubble. It's connected, but yet it's different, because we can see the brush strokes on the main bubble, and we see that it really just encircles these women. It doesn't really include this figure, but yet it somehow is. So I don't know. Maybe this is supposed to be an artist, and kind of the idea of an artist unlocking a different dimension, a different reality, an artist observing others, or again, maybe it has something to do with alchemy and with some of these other religions and mythos. So maybe this is a figure that's creating this world, and so he's kind of a part of it. Again, we'll never know. She did not like to say what her works meant, didn't like to really get into any of that. The woods there in the back do kind of remind me of some of the images I saw of the woods surrounding Cookie Hall. I think that's something that she kept with her for all her life, is that while she did have a lot of hardships early on, that she did also feel a sense of freedom while riding her horses, and being outside and being out in the woods. And I think that's something that she connects with for the whole time. And this is a video to show you how to get to where the piece is in the gallery. Let's see if this works.
So this is on the first floor of the museum in the Stewart wing. And there is our painting Friday. Well, thank you so much, Delaynna. It is so nice to see so much more of her work and to get kind of this, you know, broader context, because we only have this one piece in the museum. You know, while you were talking and we were looking at other paintings, really made me think a lot about transformation and metamorphosis, you know, those kinds of things, especially associated with the butterflies and the moths and alchemy, and just, you know, the transforming of one thing to another and another plane. Thank you so much for bringing all that up. If anyone has any questions or comments, you know, feel free to go ahead and type those into the chat. I do have a question for you. So while everyone's sort of thinking of any questions, if they have any, obviously, you know, as you were talking about her life and how she had to travel and move around to so many different countries and places. And I imagine then, was she pretty fluent in more than one language? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so she was very fluent in French and Spanish and in English, obviously, and she probably knew a lot of German as well. She was very good at picking up languages. She would be able to switch back and forth between languages in a heartbeat. And she loved to do that, just to keep people on their toes. She kind of became a little curmudgeonly in her older years, and so she really kind of liked to keep anyone who was visiting her kind of alert, and you know, she didn't want them to be mooching off of her, so they had to really keep up with her.
I can imagine. Let's see, we have a question. Joan is asking, did she have any major shows or exhibitions in her lifetime that you know of?
She did. Not as many as you would think. She was part of an exhibit, 30 women artists that Peggy Guggenheim did in New York in the early 1940s. So, and I'm wanting to say 45, don't quote me on the date. So Peggy Guggenheim really actually kind of gave her kind of a start, which is kind of funny considering their kind of perceived rivalry over Max. But Peggy Guggenheim was the person really pushing modern art in the US, especially in New York. She actually personally helped save so many artists from Europe. She paid their way. She went over to Europe and physically went and got them. So she really did help so many different artists escape during that time. And so, yeah, so that was actually a big boost for her career. Interestingly enough, though, we don't, and again, we just kind of have these periodical exhibits that'll happen and be big. She hasn't really gotten her due until I would say the last 10 years. Like when I started researching for my thesis, there was very little written about her. There was a handful of books and some articles, but not nearly as much. Like in the last 10 years is really when she got her due. And again, previous to that, she wasn't even listed amongst the surrealists. It was all the males, and that was it. They didn't include any of the women. Leonora Finney or Remedios Varro actually had joined the surrealists over in Europe before she again had fled. And so all these artists that just really didn't get their due, they're finally, people are realizing, oh yeah, they were women. And we need to look at their artwork that's just as good as the guys. And so there's a lot of works that have been done about her in the last, I would say 10, maybe 15 years. There was a big exhibition in Ireland in 2013, I want to say. And that was a big deal because no one, but when I was researching for my thesis back in the early 2000s, no one said anything about Celtic imagery. No one talked about her Irish heritage. That was just really totally ignored. And so all of a sudden, Ireland was thought to kind of claimed her again. So it's just there with the end of her life and her death that we really see people are kind of waking up.
Let's see, we have another question from Deborah. She says, she's asking about the egg, and she says, could she have used the egg as a Jewish symbol, which stands for mourning, rebirth, and the circle of life?
Definitely, definitely. She was fascinated by Judaism, as I said, from her childhood. I can't think of the friend's name of her father's, but then of course Cheeky was Jewish as well. Definitely influential. She was fascinated by all sorts of world religions. Know that she studied the Kabbalah, she studied Tibetan Buddhism. She was just fascinated by all of them. So definitely that's very much an influence on the egg symbolism that's just throughout her work.
Yeah, I think in that way, it's pretty interesting that there are so many different ways that everyone can interpret her works, because she's using symbols that can be seen in many different viewpoints from different, angles and religions, and depending on where you're from and what culture, and so